My mom sold the house my grandmother left me because she said I did not need it since I was single, and my brother needed a vacation. So she forged my signature, sold my property, and funded a luxury trip to the Maldives for her favorite son. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just called my lawyer. And 1 month later, they received a letter that changed everything. 72 hours. Or prison. My name is Nia Washington, and at 32 years old, I thought I knew how low my family could sink. I was wrong. If you have ever been the child who did everything right, but was still treated like an ATM for the golden child, hit that like button and subscribe. You need to hear how I turned their luxury vacation into a federal crime scene. It was a Tuesday evening when my Uber pulled up to the brownstone in Bronzeville. I had just spent 2 grueling weeks in New York auditing a commercial real estate firm. My bones were heavy with exhaustion. All I wanted was a hot bath in the clawfoot tub my grandmother Hattie had installed 50 years ago. The house was the only thing she left me, bypassing my father and brother completely, and it was my sanctuary. I dragged my suitcase up the limestone steps, the familiar sight of the heavy oak door offering a sense of peace. I slid my key into the lock. It did not turn. I jiggled it, thinking maybe the humidity had swollen the wood. Nothing. I pulled the key out, checked it, and tried again. It hit metal that felt wrong. New. Someone had changed my locks. A cold spike of adrenaline shot through my chest. I pounded on the door. "Open up! I know someone is in there!" I shouted, my hand reaching for my phone to call 911. I thought I was being robbed. The door swung open, but it was not a burglar in a ski mask. Standing there was a man I had never seen before. White, middle-aged, wearing a polo shirt that looked expensive and a scowl that looked practiced. "Can I help you?" he asked, blocking the entrance to my home. "To my sanctuary." I stepped forward, my compliance officer voice taking over. "Who are you? And why are you inside my house?" He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Your house. Lady, I bought this place last week. I have the deed on the kitchen counter. Now get off my porch before I call the cops for trespassing." I did not leave. I sat on my suitcase right there on the stoop and dialed 911 myself. When the patrol car arrived, I thought justice would be swift. I showed Officer Miller my ID and my digital copy of the deed on my phone. "This is my property," I told him, my voice trembling with rage. "This man has broken in." The stranger, who introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, calmly produced a folder of documents. He handed them to the officer with a look of supreme confidence. I watched Miller flip through the pages. He frowned, then looked at me with a pitying expression that made my stomach churn. "Ma'am, this sale looks legitimate. The deed transfer was signed by a Beatrice Washington, acting as power of attorney for Nia Washington." The world stopped. Beatrice. My mother. Flashbacks hit me like physical blows. 10 years ago, when I went to study in London, I had signed a limited power of attorney so she could handle my mail and basic bills. I had revoked it verbally when I returned, but I never filed the paperwork to cancel it formally. She had kept it, for a decade, waiting for the right moment to stab me in the back. "Officer," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "that power of attorney was for emergencies. It did not give her the right to sell my home without my consent." Officer Miller handed the papers back to Henderson. "I am sorry, Ms. Washington. Since the signature is technically valid on paper, this is a civil matter. We cannot remove the homeowner. You will have to take this up in court." I stood on the sidewalk watching a stranger close the door to my grandmother's house. My house. My clothes, my furniture, my memories, everything was locked inside with him. I was homeless in the city I was born in. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a notification from Instagram. My sister-in-law, Kaylee. I opened the app, my vision blurring with fury. There was a photo of her and my brother Marcus. They were at O'Hare International Airport holding champagne glasses in the first-class lounge. Marcus was wearing a new Gucci watch. Kaylee was beaming her caption reading, "Finally leaving the negativity behind. Maldives, here we come. Thanks to Mama B for making our dreams come true. Goodbye to the broke and bitter." I stared at the screen. They had sold my legacy for a beach vacation. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just took a screenshot. I told the Uber driver to drive faster. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone as I watched the GPS dot crawl toward the suburbs. I was not going there to beg. I was going there to stop a felony in progress. The 30-minute ride felt like 30 years of history pressing down on my chest. Every missed birthday, every graduation they arrived late to, every time I had bailed Marcus out of jail or debt. It all culminated in this moment. When the car screeched to a halt in front of my parents' driveway, I did not wait for the change. I threw a 20 at the driver and sprinted to the front door. It was unlocked. Of course it was. They had nothing to fear. They thought they were untouchable. The scene inside the living room stopped me cold. It looked like a luxury boutique had exploded. There were orange Hermes boxes stacked on the coffee table. Louis Vuitton duffel bags were lined up by the door, the leather still smelling fresh and expensive. Tissue paper littered the floor like snow. And in the middle of it all stood my mother Beatrice, folding a silk scarf with the calm precision of a woman who had not just committed grand larceny. Marcus was posing in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting a pair of sunglasses that I knew cost more than my first car. Kaylee was sitting on the floor surrounded by shopping bags, struggling to zip a suitcase that was bursting with new resort wear. Beatrice looked up as I stormed in. She did not flinch. She did not look guilty. She looked annoyed. "Nia, stop stomping," she said, her voice calm and terrifyingly casual. "You are tracking dirt onto the carpet." I felt a scream tear through my throat that was so raw it hurt. "You sold my house. You forged my signature and sold my grandmother's house." Beatrice sighed, placing the scarf gently into a bag. "I exercised my rights as your mother and your power of attorney. I did not sell your house. I liquidated an asset that was sitting there gathering dust so that your brother could have a fresh start. God put it on my heart to help him." "Do not bring God into this," I shouted, kicking a Gucci box aside. "You committed fraud. That house was the only thing Grandma left me because she knew you would do this. She knew you would strip me bare to clothe him." Marcus turned around, sliding his sunglasses down his nose. He looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and disdain that had defined our entire relationship. "You are being dramatic, Nia. As usual. You have a good job. You have that little apartment downtown. What do you need a 4-bedroom brownstone for? It is just you. You and your work. It is selfish to hoard all that space when family is struggling. Struggling." I pointed at the mountain of designer luggage. "You are going to the Maldives, Marcus. That is not struggling. That is a 5-star vacation paid for with my inheritance." He shrugged, picking up a brand new leather backpack. "It is an investment in my mental health. I have been stressed. I need clarity to launch my next venture. You would not understand. You are a worker bee. I am a visionary. Visionaries need to recharge." Kaylee chimed in from the floor, her voice high and sickly sweet. "Nia, really, you should be happy for us. Marcus has been working so hard on his networking. This trip is going to open so many doors for us. Besides, we bought you a souvenir keychain. We were thinking of you." The rage that flooded my veins was cold and sharp. I looked at my mother again. She was checking her watch, completely unbothered by the fact that she had rendered her daughter homeless. "Mom, that house was worth $500,000. Where is the rest of the money?" Beatrice smoothed her skirt. "It is in a safe place. Family money is family business. And right now the business is making sure your brother represents us well abroad. We have to look the part to get the part." I realized then that they did not just steal the house. They felt entitled to it. In their minds, my assets were just a reserve fund for Marcus's dreams. I was not a person to them. I was a resource, a bank account with a pulse. I stepped further into the room, my eyes locking on the coffee table. There, sitting on top of a stack of travel brochures, were two passports, Marcus's and Kaylee's. I lunged for them. If I could take the passports, they could not leave. I could stall them until the police or my lawyer could do something. My fingers brushed the cool cover of the blue booklets. Suddenly, a heavy hand clamped down on my wrist. I gasped, spinning around. It was my father. He had come in from the garage, silent as a shadow. He was a big man and his grip was iron. He twisted my arm back, forcing me to drop the passports. Dad, let go. I cried out, struggling against him. They stole my house. You have to stop them. He pushed me back, placing his body between me and the table. He did not look angry. He looked disappointed. Look at you, he said, his voice low and rumbling. Attacking your brother, trying to ruin his big moment. I raised you better than this, Nia. You are the oldest. It is your job to look out for him, not tear him down. The betrayal stole the breath from my lungs. My father, who had always claimed to be the neutral party, was standing guard over the thieves. You knew, I whispered. You knew she was selling it. He crossed his arms, his face a mask of stone. Your mother handles the finances. I support her decisions. Marcus needs this win, Nia. He has had a hard run. You are strong. You can bounce back. He cannot. We have to protect the ones who need it most. That is what family does. Marcus snatched the passports from the table, tucking them safely into his jacket pocket. He smirked at me from behind our father's shoulder. Thanks, Pops. See, Nia. This is why you are alone. You don't know how to be part of a team. You are so obsessed with what is yours that you don't care about us. Beatrice clapped her hands together, signaling the end of the discussion. All right, that is enough. The Uber Black is here. We are going to be late. Grab the bags. I watched helplessly as they mobilized. Marcus grabbed the Louis Vuitton duffels. Kaylee gathered her shopping bags, checking her reflection in the mirror one last time. My father picked up the heaviest suitcases, carrying them out to the sleek black SUV waiting in the driveway, like a dutiful servant to his son's ego. Beatrice stopped in front of me on her way out. She reached out and adjusted my collar, a gesture so maternal and yet so mocking it made my skin crawl. Don't wait up for us, dear, she said. And do not do anything foolish like calling the police again. It is a civil matter, remember. We will bring you back some sand. She patted my cheek, turned and walked out the door. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the empty boxes and discarded tissue paper that were the only remains of my inheritance. Through the front window, I watched the driver load their luggage. I saw Marcus laughing as he held the door open for Kaylee. I saw my parents waving from the porch as if seeing them off to war instead of a tropical resort funded by fraud. The car door slammed shut. The engine purred. And then they were gone. The house fell silent. I was standing in the home where I grew up, but I had never felt more like a stranger. My father's words echoed in my ears. You are strong. You can bounce back. They punished me for my competence and rewarded him for his incompetence. They thought this was the end of the conversation. They thought I would go back to my rental cry for a few days and then get back to work because that is what Nia does. Nia fixes things. Nia absorbs the pain. But as I looked at the debris of their greed scattered across the floor, I felt the tears drying up. They were right about one thing. I was strong, but they were wrong about what that meant. I was not going to bounce back. I was going to strike back. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady now. I dialed Dante's number again. He picked up on the first ring. They just left, I said, my voice cold and hard as the diamond they had likely bought with my money. Good, Dante said. The clock starts now. Get out of there, Nia, and let's burn their kingdom down. The silence that filled the house after the SUV disappeared around the corner was heavy and suffocating. It felt less like an empty home and more like a crime scene where the perpetrators had just casually walked away with the smoking gun. I stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. My father was right about one thing. I was strong. But strength is not just about enduring pain. It is about doing what needs to be done when your hands are shaking and your heart is breaking. I locked the front door, not to keep people out, but to ensure I was undisturbed. I was not leaving this house until I found the paper trail. I went straight to my father's study. It was a room that smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco, a space that we were forbidden to enter as children. My mother always said it was where important business happened. Now I knew that important business was just a euphemism for their financial house of cards. I sat down at the heavy mahogany desk. It was cluttered with bills, church flyers, and half-opened envelopes. My mother was meticulous about her appearance but chaotic with her administration. That was her weakness. She assumed that because she was the matriarch, no one would dare question her filing system. She was wrong. I started with the drawers. Nothing but old tax returns and manuals for appliances they no longer owned. I moved to the filing cabinet. It was locked. I looked around the room. Beatrice Washington was a creature of habit. She hid keys in places she thought were clever, but were actually painfully predictable. I checked the porcelain vase on the bookshelf. I checked under the desk lamp. Finally, I lifted the potted peace lily in the corner. There it was, a small silver key resting in the saucer. I unlocked the cabinet and began to dig. It did not take long. There was a manila folder near the front labeled Simply House. I opened it and felt the blood drain from my face. It was not just one document, it was a timeline of betrayal. There were emails printed out between my mother and a real estate agent I did not know. Emails dating back 3 months. They had been planning this while I was sending them money for groceries. They had been negotiating the sale price of my sanctuary while I was paying their electric bill. I flipped through the pages until I found the closing documents. And there it was. My name, Nia Washington, signed in blue ink at the bottom of the deed transfer. I traced the signature with my finger. It was a good forgery, but it was not perfect. The loops on the capital N were too wide. The slant was slightly off to the right. My mother had arthritis in her hands. If you looked closely, you could see the microscopic tremors in the ink where she had struggled to keep her hand steady, forcing it to mimic the flow of my own handwriting. I pushed the chair back and looked at the trash can next to the desk. It was full of shredded paper, but right on top there were several crumpled balls of printer paper. I smoothed one out. It was a practice sheet. My mother had written my name over and over again. Nia Washington. Nia Washington. Nia Washington. Dozens of times. Trying to get the muscle memory right. Trying to become me so she could rob me. It was sickening. It was the most intimate violation I could imagine. Then my eyes caught the notary stamp on the official document. I expected to see a stranger's name, someone they had paid off or tricked. But the name stamped in black ink made bile rise in my throat. Betty Jean Johnson. Auntie Betty. She was not my blood aunt, but she might as well have been. She sat next to my mother in the choir every Sunday. She baked the lemon pound cake for every birthday I had growing up. She had hugged me at Christmas and told me how proud she was of my career. And then she had sat in this room, watched my mother forge my signature, and stamped it with her official seal. This was not just a family betrayal, it was a community conspiracy. The church mothers who preached about honesty and righteousness were running a fraud ring from the fellowship hall. I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app. The house had been held in a trust my grandmother set up, but there was an attached maintenance account for taxes and repairs. I had deposited $5,000 in it just last week to cover the property taxes. I logged in. The balance was zero, negative actually due to an overdraft fee. I clicked on the transaction history. A cash withdrawal had been made 2 days ago at a branch 3 miles from here. I dialed the bank's fraud line immediately. The operator came on the line, her voice professionally detached. I gave her my information. I told her I did not make the withdrawal. She pulled up the records. Ma'am, the teller notes say the customer presented identification and answered all security questions correctly. Of course she did. Security questions are useless when the thief gave birth to you. She knew my mother's maiden name. She knew the name of my first pet. She knew the street I grew up on. She had used her knowledge of my life as a skeleton key to pick my pockets. Did the person present a driver's license? I asked, my voice tight. Yes, the operator confirmed. We have a scan of it on file. Can you describe the photo? It was an older photo, the operator said. The woman had glasses, short hair. I closed my eyes. My mother had renewed my license for me when I was in college. She must have kept the old, expired one. She had been holding on to these pieces of my identity for years, hoarding them like ammunition for a war I did not know we were fighting. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of the study, surrounded by the physical evidence of how little I meant to them. They had stripped me for parts. My name, my credit, my home, my history. It was all just currency to them. Fuel for Marcus's ego and Kaylee's Instagram feed. They thought they had covered their tracks. They thought that because they were family, I would just take it. They thought I would be too ashamed to expose my own mother as a criminal. I looked at the practice sheet again. The shaky, desperate handwriting of a woman who felt entitled to everything I had earned. I remembered my father standing in the living room holding me back, telling me to be a team player. He knew she was practicing my signature. He probably watched her do it. He probably cheered her on. The tears I had been holding back since I saw the empty brownstone threatened to spill over, but I forced them down. I swallowed the lump in my throat until it hurt. Crying was for daughters. Crying was for victims. I was not a victim anymore. I was a compliance officer. I was an auditor. And I had just found a discrepancy that was going to cost them everything. I took out my phone again. I did not call the police this time. The police had already told me it was a civil matter. They were useless until I built a case so undeniable that they had no choice but to act. I scrolled past my family group chat, past the messages from my cousins asking if I was okay. I stopped at a name I hadn't called in 6 months. Dante Sterling. Dante was not a family friend. He was a shark. We had gone to law school together before I pivoted to finance. He had stayed the course, becoming one of the most vicious litigators in Chicago. He specialized in asset recovery and fraud. He was expensive, he was aggressive, and he hated bullies. I pressed the call button. It rang twice. Nia. His voice was smooth, deep, and surprised. To what do I owe the pleasure? I haven't heard from you since the gala. I looked down at the forged deed on the desk. Dante. I said, my voice ice cold. I have a job for you. It involves real estate fraud, identity theft, and a notary who violated her oath. I need you to go to war for me. Who is the target? He asked, the professional interest sharpening his tone. My mother, I said. And my brother. And the entire church choir if necessary. Dante paused for a beat. Then I heard the smile in his voice. Send me the files, Nia. Let's get to work. I started taking photos of every document on the desk. The deed, the emails, the practice signatures. The bank withdrawal receipt I found tucked in a ledger. I built a digital dossier of their crimes right there in my father's study. I was not leaving a single scrap of paper behind. They wanted a vacation. I was going to give them a permanent one. State-sponsored. I packed the physical evidence into my bag. I walked out of the study and closed the door. I walked out of the house and locked it with my key, the key they hadn't bothered to take back because they thought I was powerless. I stood on the porch and looked at the neighborhood where I had learned to ride a bike, where I had learned to be a good girl, where I had learned to share. I was done sharing. I got into the waiting Uber. Take me to the Hyatt downtown, I told the driver, and step on it. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. The grieving daughter was gone. The prosecutor had taken her place, and the clock was ticking. They had 72 hours of peace left. After that, I was going to bring the sky down on their heads. Dante Sterling did not have an office. He had a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Chicago River that screamed power and intimidation. When I walked in, the receptionist did not ask for my name. She simply pressed a button under her desk, and the heavy double doors at the end of the hall buzzed open. Dante was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city like he owned it. He turned when I entered, his suit cut sharp enough to bleed, his expression unreadable until he saw the file in my hand. He did not offer me coffee or small talk. He pointed to the leather chair across from his desk and sat down, extending a hand for the evidence. I watched him read. Dante was a man who had built his reputation on destroying corporate giants and white-collar criminals. He read through the forged deed, the notary log I had photographed, and the emails between my mother and the real estate agent. His face remained a mask of professional detachment, but I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten when he reached the practice sheet where my mother had learned to become me. He set the papers down and leaned back, steeping his fingers. "Nia, this is not a family dispute," he said, his voice low and smooth, the kind of voice that made juries lean in. "This is a federal indictment waiting to happen. Your mother did not just forge a signature, she used the mail and wire systems to facilitate a fraudulent transaction. That is wire fraud. Each email she sent, each electronic transfer, that is a separate count. And because she used a power of attorney that she likely manipulated or retained under false pretenses involving your grandmother's estate, we can make a strong argument for financial elder abuse by proxy. She exploited the legal instruments your grandmother left to protect you." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Federal charges. Prison time. I had come here angry, wanting my house back, but Dante was laying out a path that ended with my mother and brother in orange jumpsuits. He watched me process this, his dark eyes assessing my resolve. "You need to decide right now what you want, Nia. If we file this civilly, we can freeze the assets and maybe get the house back after a year of litigation. But they will get away with it. They will cry to the judge about family misunderstandings, and you might settle for pennies. Or we go nuclear. We file criminal complaints immediately. We frame this as identity theft and grand larceny. We force the district attorney to look at Betty Jean Johnson and her little notary stamp. But once I pull that trigger, there is no going back. You will be the woman who put her mother in prison." I looked at the city skyline, thinking about the empty brownstone. I thought about my father holding me back while Marcus laughed. I thought about Kaylee's Instagram caption about leaving the negativity behind. They had not just taken my property, they had taken my safety. They had taken the one thing my grandmother had given me to ensure I would never be dependent on them. They had gambled my future on a beach vacation. I looked Dante in the eye. "I do not want a settlement," I said, my voice steady. "I want justice. They did not treat me like a daughter or a sister. They treated me like a mark, like a victim. If they want to act like criminals, I will treat them like criminals." "Burn it down, Dante." He nodded, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Good. I was hoping you would say that." He pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Sarah, get me the district attorney on line 1. And call Reynolds. I need a private investigator on a plane to the Maldives tonight." I blinked. "A private investigator? Why do we need a PI?" I asked. Dante opened a second file on his desk, one I had not noticed. "Because, Nia, people like your brother do not steal $500,000 just to go swimming. I did a preliminary background check on Marcus while you were on your way over. Your brother is not just a failed entrepreneur. He is in debt, deep debt. He owes 6 figures to some very patient, very dangerous people in the South Side. This vacation isn't a celebration. It is a cooling-off period. He is laundering that money." The room seemed to spin. Laundering. My mother had sold my house to help Marcus pay off loan sharks. It made a sick, twisted kind of sense. The urgency, the cash withdrawal, the sudden need to leave the country. Dante continued, his voice all business now. "We need to know exactly where that money is going. If he is spending it on hotels, that is one thing. If he is transferring it to offshore accounts or handing bags of cash to fixers, that is another. We need proof of dissipation of assets. I am sending Reynolds to track them. He will document every cent they spend, every dinner, every spa treatment, every shady meeting. When they land back on U.S. soil, I want a stack of photos thick enough to choke a judge. I left Dante's office an hour later, my head spinning, but my resolve harder than ever. I checked into the Hyatt using my corporate card and sat by the window watching the Chicago traffic. I felt like a general waiting for the first reports from the front lines. The silence from my family was deafening. They were probably in the air now, drinking champagne, thinking they had pulled off the heist of the century. They had no idea that a shark in a tailored suit was already sharpening his teeth. 2 days passed. I went to work, I audited spreadsheets, I smiled at colleagues, and inside I was screaming. Then, on the third night, my phone pinged. It was an encrypted email from Dante. The subject line was simply, "Update." I opened it. There were photos attached. High-resolution images taken with a long-range lens. The first few were what I expected. Marcus and Kaylee on a white sand beach looking tan and carefree. My mother sitting under an umbrella reading a Bible looking for all the world like a saint. But then I scrolled down. The next set of photos was different. They were taken at night in the back of a dimly lit restaurant away from the tourist strip. Marcus was sitting at a table, but he was not with Kaylee or my parents. He was sitting across from a man with a scar running down his cheek and a suit that cost more than my stolen house. Marcus did not look arrogant in these photos. He looked terrified. He was sliding a thick envelope across the table. I read Dante's note at the bottom of the email. Reynolds identified the man. His name is Victor Volkov. He is not a tour guide. He runs an international sports betting ring out of Macau. Marcus isn't just paying off local debts, Nia. Your brother has been gambling with money he didn't have for years. That envelope contained $50,000 in cash. He is buying his life, not a vacation. I stared at the photo of my brother sweating in the tropical heat, handing over my inheritance to a criminal. The betrayal deepened into a pit in my stomach. My mother hadn't just chosen him over me. She had chosen to feed a monster. She had sacrificed my stability to cover up his addiction. And now I had the proof. They weren't just thieves, they were compromised. And I had 72 hours until they landed to decide exactly how hard I was going to hit them. While my brother was sipping vintage champagne on a white sand beach, I was sitting on a lumpy mattress in a roadside motel that smelled of stale smoke and lemon cleaner. I had moved out of the downtown Hyatt 2 days ago. Dante's retainer was burning through my liquidity, and with my maintenance account drained to zero, I had to be strategic. Every dollar I spent on comfort was a dollar I couldn't spend on destroying them. So I sat in the dim light of the motel room, listening to the hum of the ice machine outside my door, and tortured myself by opening Instagram. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, except I was the one bleeding on the pavement while they drove away in a convertible. Kaylee had been posting non-stop since they landed. Her story was a curated feed of excess designed to make everyone back home jealous, but to me, it looked like evidence. The first photo was a close-up of a seafood tower that must have cost $500. Lobster tails, king crab legs, oysters on the half-shell, all glistening under the resort lights. The caption read, "Finally getting the royal treatment we deserve. Manifesting abundance really works." I stared at the screen, eating a granola bar for dinner because I was too nauseous to order food. Manifesting. They called grand larceny manifesting. I swiped to the next post. It was a video. Marcus was standing on the deck of an overwater bungalow, looking out at the turquoise ocean. He was wearing a linen shirt that I knew he didn't own a week ago, and a pair of sunglasses that cost more than my monthly car payment. He held up a glass of amber liquid to the camera and winked. To the haters who said we couldn't make it happen, he said, his voice thick with arrogance, "Watch us shine. Negative energy can't reach us here." The camera panned to Kaylee, giggling in a designer bikini. Goodbye to the broken bitter, she chirped. I knew exactly who the broken bitter was supposed to be. It was me. The sister who had paid his bail, his rent, and his debts for a decade. The sister whose signature they had practiced forging until they got it right. They weren't just spending my money. They were mocking me with it. I threw the phone onto the bed, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. It wasn't just the theft. It was the audacity. They truly believed they deserved this. They believed that my hard work was just a resource for them to harvest. I was not a person to them. I was a crop, and it was harvest season. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a social media notification. It was a text from Mrs. Gable, my next-door neighbor back at the brownstone in Bronzeville. She was the neighborhood watch captain and the biggest gossip on the block, but she had always had a soft spot for me. The text read, "Nia, honey, I thought you should know. Your mother is hosting a tea party today. All the church ladies are there. She is telling everyone that Marcus bought you a condo downtown, and that is why the house sold. She says he is such a generous brother." I stared at the text. A condo. They were rewriting reality in real time. They weren't just stealing my asset. They were stealing my reputation. They were painting Marcus as the savior and me as the charity case. If I let this narrative take root by the time I got the house back, everyone would think I was the ungrateful sister suing her benefactor. I couldn't let her spin this lie. I grabbed my keys and drove to the suburbs. I didn't take the highway. I took the back roads, driving mechanically, my mind replaying the video of Marcus raising that glass. When I reached my parents' neighborhood, I didn't park in the driveway. I parked 3 houses down behind a large hedge that obscured my car. I walked to the house, keeping to the grass so my footsteps wouldn't crunch on the pavement. The windows of the sunroom were open to let in the spring breeze. I could hear them before I saw them. The clinking of fine china. The murmur of polite laughter. It was the sound of my mother holding court. I crept up to the side of the house, crouching beneath the hydrangeas my grandmother had planted 30 years ago. I pulled out my phone and pressed record. Oh, yes. Beatrice's voice floated out smooth and sweet as poisoned honey. "We are just so proud of him. Marcus has always had such a head for business, you know. His investment firm finally took off this year. He felt so terrible about Nia living in that old drafty brownstone all alone. It was too much maintenance for a single woman. So he stepped in, sold it for her, handled all the messy paperwork, and used the profit to buy her a lovely modern condo in the Loop. Smaller, easier to manage. One of the church mothers cooed. That is so thoughtful, Beatrice. Most brothers wouldn't do that. My mother sighed, a sound of performative martyrdom. I know, he is such a good son. He even gave me $50,000 from his own earnings to finally redo this kitchen and fix the roof. He said, Mama, you deserve the best. That is why he took Kaylee to the Maldives, to celebrate his success. Nia is happy, of course, but you know how she is. She struggles with gratitude. She is a bit fragile right now, so we are giving her space. I crouched there in the dirt, my hand gripping the phone so hard I thought the screen might crack. Fragile. Ungrateful. She was taking the money Marcus had stolen from me, money that was laundering through a criminal enterprise, and using it to renovate her kitchen. She was accepting bribes from her son funded by the sale of her own mother's legacy and spinning it into a story of filial piety. It was sick. It was a level of delusion that bordered on psychosis. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream through the window that her son was paying off a Russian bookie, not buying condos. I wanted to tell the church ladies that the tea they were drinking was paid for with fraud. But I stayed down. I watched the recording timer tick upward. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes of her assassinating my character and validating his crimes. This was better than a scream. This was proof of intent. This proved she knew about the money. It proved she was actively participating in the cover-up. She wasn't an innocent bystander manipulated by her son. She was the PR department for the heist. I stopped the recording and saved it to 3 different cloud accounts before I even stood up. I slipped away as quietly as I had come, leaving them to their lies and their lemon cake. I walked back to my car, feeling a cold, hard resolve settling in my chest. They were celebrating their victory. Let them. It would make the fall that much harder. I sat in the driver's seat ready to turn the key when my phone pinged with a notification that made my blood freeze. It wasn't a text or a social media alert, it was a high-priority security alert from my bank. I opened the app, my breath catching in my throat. A transfer request had just been initiated. Not from the house maintenance account that was already empty. This was from my personal emergency savings account, the one I hadn't touched in 3 years, the one I thought was secure. Attempted transfer, $10,000. Origin of request, Mail Maldives via online banking. Status pending verification. Marcus wasn't satisfied. He had burned through the house money paying off Volkov and funding their first-class lifestyle, and now he was getting greedy. He must have guessed my password, probably my grandmother's birthday, a detail my mother knew and had likely fed to him. He was trying to drain me dry from the other side of the world. He didn't just want the house, he wanted to leave me with nothing. He wanted to break me. I stared at the blinking red text on my screen. He was desperate. And greed makes people sloppy. He had just tried to access a federally insured bank account across international lines using a known IP address associated with his luxury resort. He hadn't just committed fraud against me. He had just handed Dante Sterling jurisdiction. He thought he was robbing a piggy bank. He didn't realize he had just tripped the wire on a federal trap. I denied the transaction and dialed Dante. It was time to close the net. I sat across from Dante in his office the next morning, and the air between us was thick with the scent of stale coffee and impending violence. The attempted transfer from the Maldives had been the final piece of the puzzle Dante needed to authorize a full forensic deep dive into Marcus's financials. He had his team working overnight, and what they found was not just a smoking gun, it was a bomb crater. Dante slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany desk. It was a flowchart, complicated and messy with lines connecting names and shell companies that spiraled outward like a spiderweb. At the center of the web was my brother. "Look at the bottom line," Nia Dante said, his voice devoid of his usual swagger, replaced by the cold precision of a predator. "Your brother does not just have a spending problem, he has a $500,000 problem." The private investigator Reynolds pulled Marcus's credit report and cross-referenced it with some off-the-books contacts we have in the South Side. Marcus has been gambling on everything from high-stakes poker to international cricket for 5 years. He has been chasing losses with bigger bets and borrowing from people who do not send late notices. They send guys with baseball bats. I stared at the number. $500,000. $500,000. It was an astronomical sum. It was enough to buy a house. It was enough to ruin a life. And it was almost exactly the market value of the brownstone my grandmother had left me. The pieces started to click into place with a sickening audibility. The urgency to sell. The cash buyer. The fact that my mother had accepted an offer that was $50,000 below market value without negotiating. It gets worse. Dante continued tapping a box on the flowchart labeled Obsidian Holdings LLC. "This is the company that bought your house. On paper, it looks like a standard property management firm registered in Delaware." But Reynolds dug deeper. Obsidian Holdings is a shell company. Its primary shareholder is a man named Viktor Volkov, the same man Marcus was handing an envelope to in the Maldives. "Your mother did not sell your house to a nice investor looking for a rental property." She handed the deed directly to the loan shark holding a knife to her son's throat. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother. Beatrice Washington, the woman who sat in the front pew every Sunday and judged the hemlines of the choir girls. She was not just an enabler, she was a mule. She had taken the only asset I owned, the legacy of the woman who raised us both, and used it to pay a ransom. She did not know, I whispered, trying to find some shred of humanity in the woman who gave birth to me. She could not have known who they were. She just thought Marcus needed capital. Dante shook his head slowly. "Nia, stop making excuses for her. She knew Marcus was in trouble. Maybe she did not know Volkov's name. Maybe she did not know about the sports betting. But she knew her son needed $500,000 in cash immediately, and she knew he could not get it from a bank. She walked into that closing knowing she was signing away your future to save his present. And here is the kicker. She let them rob you blind. Obsidian Holdings bought the house for $450,000. That cleared the bulk of the principal Marcus owed. The $50,000 Marcus took to the Maldives. That was the interest payment. He is laundering the last of your inheritance through luxury resorts and overpriced dinners to pay the vigorish on a debt that is not even fully cleared yet. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the Chicago skyline. The betrayal was so absolute it felt physical, like a weight pressing against my lungs. They had turned me into a collateral damage in their criminal enterprise. My hard work, my stability, my home, it was all just fuel for the fire Marcus had started, and my mother had been the one to strike the match. But why the vacation, I asked, watching the traffic crawl below? If he is so terrified, why is he posting photos of lobster tails? Why not go into hiding? Because appearances are everything to a con man, Dante said, standing up to join me at the window. If Marcus disappears, people start asking questions. If he goes on a luxury vacation, he looks successful. He looks like a man who just closed a big deal, not a man running for his life. And Volkov probably demanded it. He wants his money washed. He wants Marcus to spend that $50,000 in a way that looks like legitimate consumption, so it cannot be traced back to the debt. Your brother is a walking ATM for the mob right now, and he is smiling for the camera while he does it. It was a perfect trap. They had used my assets to buy their freedom, and they were counting on my shame and my family loyalty to keep me quiet. They thought I would treat this as a civil dispute. They thought I would argue about property rights and probate law while they spent my money. They did not realize I was done playing by the rules of a family that had never respected me. I turned back to Dante. My eyes landed on a file on the corner of his desk labeled Federal Indictments Pending. An idea began to form in my mind. A cold, dangerous idea. Dante, I said, pointing to the file. You said Volkov runs an international ring. Is he under investigation? Dante smiled, and it was the smile of a shark scenting blood. The FBI has been building a RICO case against Volkov's organization for 2 years. They are squeezing his lieutenants. They are freezing his assets. Obsidian Holdings is on their radar. They just haven't moved on it yet because they are waiting for a bigger fish. So Volkov is feeling the heat. I said, my mind racing. He is sitting on a portfolio of distressed assets and stolen properties, and he knows the feds are watching. He needs to liquidate. He needs to get clean cash and get out of real estate before they seize everything. Dante nodded slowly, seeing where I was going. Exactly. He is vulnerable. He is holding a hot potato, and your house is part of it. I walked back to the desk and picked up the flowchart. I traced the line from Marcus to Obsidian Holdings. If Volkov is desperate, he might be willing to sell his debt portfolio. He might be willing to sell the note on Marcus's loan and the title to the house just to get a fraction of the cash back and wash his hands of the liability. Dante's eyes widened. Nia, are you suggesting what I think you are suggesting? You want to buy the debt. I am a compliance officer, Dante. I said, my voice steady and hard. I know how to structure a distressed asset purchase. If I use the leverage of the FBI investigation, I can approach Volkov's proxy. I can offer to buy the debt Obsidian Holdings holds against Marcus for pennies on the dollar. I can buy the deed back from them as part of a settlement to keep you from handing this entire file over to the U.S. attorney immediately. It was insane. It was dangerous. And it was brilliant. If I bought the debt, I would not just get my house back. I would step into the shoes of the creditor. I would become the person Marcus owed $500,000 to. I would own his debt. I would own his future. And because my mother had co-signed everything to facilitate the fraud, I would own her too. Dante sat down and started typing furiously on his laptop. It is risky, he said without looking up. But it is doable. We set up a blind trust. We approach Volkov's lawyers with a quiet offer. We tell them we know about the federal heat and we offer them a clean exit. They get some cash, you get the paper. They do not know it is you. They just see a way out of a federal indictment. How much, I asked. How much to buy my life back and own theirs? Dante stopped typing and looked at me. Volkov wants out. He knows the house is stolen property, and that brings heat. He knows Marcus is a liability. I bet we can get the whole package, the debt note, and the deed for $200,000. He writes off the rest as the cost of doing business. $200,000. It was my entire life savings. Everything I had put away in my retirement accounts, everything I had invested. It would wipe me out, but it would give me the ultimate weapon. I would not just be the sister they betrayed. I would be the landlord. I would be the bank. I would be the one holding the gavel. Do it, I said. Liquidate my portfolio. Draw up the papers. I want to own them, Dante. I want to own the debt, the house, the interest, the penalties. I want to own the air they breathe. Dante picked up his phone. I will make the call. But Nia, once we do this, you are crossing a line. You are not just fighting for your property anymore. You are entering the game. I looked at the picture of Marcus laughing in the Maldives. I looked at the signature my mother had forged. I was already in the game. They just did not know I was the one keeping score. Make the call, I said. And tell Reynolds to keep watching them. I want to know the exact moment the champagne stops tasting sweet. Because when I am done with them, they are going to wish they had drowned in that ocean. The arrival gate at O'Hare International Airport was a chaotic sea of weary travelers and tearful reunions. But my family stood out like a diamond in a coal chute. I watched the feed from the private investigator Reynolds, who was positioned near the baggage claim. Marcus and Kaylee glided through the automatic doors, looking like they had just stepped out of a magazine spread for the morally bankrupt. They were bronze-tanned, their skin glowing with the kind of health that only other people's money can buy. Marcus wore a white linen suit that was wrinkled in a way that was supposed to look effortless, but just looked messy, and Kaylee was draped in a caftan that probably cost more than my first semester of college tuition. They pushed a cart stacked high with new luggage. Evidently, the Louis Vuitton duffels were not enough to hold all the souvenirs they had bought with my future. Waiting for them at the curb was not a sensible sedan or a family van. It was a stretch limousine, black and gleaming under the harsh airport lights. My mother, Beatrice, stood next to the driver, her chest puffed out with pride. She had hired it using the emergency credit card she thought I did not know about, the one linked to the house account she had drained. She looked like the Queen Mother welcoming home conquering heroes instead of a woman greeting two fugitives who had just spent $50,000 laundering mob money. When she saw them, she let out a squeal that the microphone picked up clearly. "My babies," she cried, rushing forward to embrace Marcus, ignoring the fact that he smelled like stale airplane air and gin. She kissed his cheeks, admiring his tan, as if it were a medal of valor. "Did you have a wonderful time?" she asked, her voice thick with adoration. "Tell me everything. Did you get the sand?" Marcus grinned, flashing teeth that had been whitened at a spa I paid for. "It was incredible, Mama. You have no idea, we were treated like royalty. They knew who we were." Kaylee chimed in, holding up her wrist to show off a stack of gold bangles. "Look what Marcus bought me. It is real gold, Mama B. We are bringing abundance back with us." Beatrice beamed, touching the jewelry with covetous fingers. "You deserve it, darling. You both do. Now come on. The driver is waiting. I have champagne on ice in the back." They turned toward the open door of the limousine, ready to slide back into their bubble of delusion. They thought they were going home to a celebration. They thought the hardest part of their trip was the jet lag. They did not see the man in the charcoal suit stepping out from behind a concrete pillar. They did not see the two process servers flanking him like silent gargoyles. Dante Sterling moved with the fluid grace of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. He did not shout. He did not make a scene. He simply stepped into their path, blocking the open door of the limo with his physical presence. "Mr. Washington," he said, his voice cutting through the airport noise like a razor through silk. Welcome back to Chicago. I trust the flight was comfortable. Marcus stopped dead. His smile faltered, then dropped completely. He looked at Dante, then at the process servers, then back at Dante. Who are you? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. Move aside. We have a car waiting. Dante did not move. I am sure you do, but before you get in, you have some paperwork to accept. He nodded to the servers. In perfect synchronization, they stepped forward and thrust thick envelopes into Marcus's and Kaylee's hands. They did not ask if they wanted them. They simply pressed them against their chests until they instinctively grabbed them. You have been served, Dante said, his tone pleasant but final. Marcus looked down at the envelope. The words summons and complaint were visible even from the camera's distance. What is this? He demanded, his face losing its island glow and turning a sickly shade of gray. This, Dante explained, is a notification that you are being sued for fraud, conversion of assets, and civil conspiracy. It is also a formal notice that the sale of the property at 425 King Drive is being contested on the grounds of forgery and identity theft. And finally, it is a courtesy letter from me to you. You have 72 hours, Marcus. 72 hours to return the deed to its original owner and to return the $450,000 you stole, plus the $50,000 you spent on this little excursion. If the funds and the title are not in my office by Friday at 5 o'clock, we will be filing criminal charges with the district attorney and the FBI. Kaylee let out a shriek that turned heads 3 gates away. She dropped the envelope as if it were burning her skin. This is harassment, she screamed, pulling out her phone. She held it up, aiming the camera at Dante's face, her thumb hitting the live button on Instagram. You are harassing us. Look, everyone, this man is attacking us at the airport. My sister-in-law, Nia, sent him. She is jealous because we are successful and she is miserable. She is trying to ruin our moment. Nia, if you are watching this, you are a bully. You are toxic. Leave us alone. Dante did not flinch. He looked directly into her phone lens and smiled a smile that did not reach his eyes. Hello, Kaylee's followers. While you are watching, please note that recording a federal officer of the court while he is serving legal papers can be considered intimidation. Also, you might want to ask Kaylee why she is wearing jewelry bought with stolen funds. It is all in the public record now. Kaylee gasped and lowered the phone, ending the stream abruptly. She looked at Marcus, her eyes wide with panic. Marcus, do something. Tell him to leave. But Marcus could not speak. He was staring at the papers in his hands trembling so hard the paper rattled. He knew exactly what this meant. It wasn't just about Nia getting her house back. It was about the money. The money he didn't have, the money he had already given to Volkov. He couldn't return it. He couldn't undo the transaction. The $450,000 was gone, paid to a man who would cut off his fingers if he asked for a refund. And the $50,000 he had spent on the trip was gone too. He was standing at the edge of a cliff, and Dante had just pushed him. Beatrice stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. How dare you, she spat at Dante. You work for Nia, don't you? That ungrateful girl. This is family business. You have no right to ambush my son like this. He is tired. He needs to rest. Get out of our way. Dante looked at my mother with a mixture of pity and disgust. Mrs. Washington, your name is on the summons, too. You witnessed the forged signature. You facilitated the transfer. If your son goes down for this, you are going with him. I suggest you stop worrying about his rest and start worrying about your own defense. 72 hours. That is all you have. Dante turned and walked away, his team following him, leaving my family standing on the curb. The champagne in the limo was getting warm. The driver looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight and checking his watch. The bubble had popped. Kaylee burst into tears, stomping her foot. This is a nightmare, she wailed. I cannot believe she did this to us. She is a monster. Marcus, tell her she can't do this. Marcus just stood there, staring at the retreating back of the lawyer. He looked like a man who had just heard his own death sentence. He turned to Beatrice, his eyes wide and terrified. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. He pulled her close, leaning down so that only she could hear him, but the parabolic microphone Reynolds had set up caught every desperate syllable. "Mama," he whispered, his voice shaking with a fear that went deeper than lawsuits. "Mama, you have to fix this. You have to make her stop. I don't have the money. It is gone. All of it. And if I don't pay it back, Volkov is going to kill me. Mama, you have to save me. They will kill me, Mama. They will kill me." Beatrice looked at her golden boy, her face draining of color as the reality of his words sank in. She looked at the limo, then at the envelope in his hand, then back at his terrified eyes. For the first time, she didn't look like the queen. She looked like an old woman realizing she had bet on the wrong horse. "Get in the car," she whispered. "Just get in the car. We will figure this out." But as they scrambled into the back seat of the limousine, huddled together like rats on a sinking ship, I knew the truth. There was nothing to figure out. The clock was ticking, and they were already out of time. The first 24 hours after the airport ambush were a masterclass in psychological warfare, only this time, I wasn't the one being gaslit. I was the one holding the remote control. I sat in my motel room, which had become my command center, and watched my phone light up with the name Beatrice Washington. She called 17 times in the first hour. I didn't answer a single one. I let them go to voicemail, and then I listened to them in chronological order. It was like listening to the stages of grief on fast forward, but without the acceptance. First came the rage. Her voice was shrill, distorting the audio. "Nia, pick up this phone right now. You have embarrassed us in front of strangers. You have disrespected your brother. I command you to call that lawyer off. Who do you think you are? You are nothing without this family." Then came the bargaining. "Nia, baby, listen. We can work this out. Marcus says he can set up a payment plan. He just needs time. We can pray on this. We can go to Pastor Miller and have a mediation. You don't want the police involved. That is not how we do things." Finally, when the silence from my end stretched into the night, came the manipulation. The weaponized frailty she had honed for decades. "I can't breathe, Nia. My chest hurts. You are killing me. If I die tonight, it will be on your conscience. I have a bottle of pills right here. Do you want that? Do you want to bury your mother because you wouldn't share a house you don't even live in?" I deleted the messages. I didn't block her, though. I wanted the record. I wanted the jury to hear how a mother speaks to the child she robbed. While Beatrice was screaming into the void, the real demolition was happening inside the house on King Drive. Reynolds, my private investigator, had parked down the street. He couldn't see inside, but the walls of those old brownstones were thin, and the shouting match that erupted was loud enough to wake the neighbors. According to Reynolds's report, the lights in the living room didn't go off all night. Inside, the illusion of the golden boy was shattering. Marcus couldn't hide behind his sunglasses anymore. He had to tell Kaylee the truth. I can only imagine the scene, but knowing them, it was ugly. Kaylee, who thought she had married a tech entrepreneur, finding out she was legally hitched to a gambling addict who had just gambled away her freedom. "You told me we were rich," I heard her scream on the audio recording Reynolds sent later. "You told me the house was a gift. You said your sister didn't want it." Marcus's voice was a pathetic whine. "I thought I could win it back, Kay. I had a system. The Maldives was supposed to be a lucky trip. I was going to double the money on the sports books and pay Nia back before she even got home. I just needed a little more time." That was the moment the love story ended. Kaylee didn't cry. She got violent. There was a crash that sounded like glass shattering. Reynolds noted it was likely the oversized bottle of duty-free perfume she had been bragging about on Instagram. Then came the sound of zippers ripping and fabric tearing. She was destroying the haul. The silk scarves, the linen shirts, the souvenirs of their crime. If she couldn't keep them, nobody would. I pictured Marcus cowering on the sofa, watching his wife shred the last remnants of his dignity, while his mother probably tried to sweep up the glass, still making excuses for him. But the real shock came from my father. My father, who had spent 30 years hiding behind his newspaper and letting Beatrice run the show. My father, who had physically restrained me from taking my brother's passport, he finally found his spine, and it wasn't pretty. "Shut up, Beatrice," his voice boomed on the recording, a sound so rare it made me jump even listening to it hours later. "Just shut up. You did this. You told me it was legal. You told me Naya gave you permission. You lied to me." Beatrice sputtered, trying to regain control. "I did it for us, Franklin. For the family." Marcus needed a leg up. "You didn't do it for us," he roared. "You did it because you can't stand that Nia doesn't need you. You hate that she is successful without your help. So you stole from the child who works to spoil the child who plays. And now look at us. We are going to jail Beatrice. At our age, we are going to lose the pension. We are going to lose the house. All because you wanted to play Queen Mother." The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, Beatrice Washington had no comeback. Her husband, her enabler, had looked at her and seen a criminal. The foundation of their marriage, built on the mutual agreement that Marcus could do no wrong, had crumbled under the weight of a federal indictment. I sat in my motel room listening to my family disintegrate, and I felt nothing but a cold, clinical satisfaction. They were turning on each other. The pressure cooker I had created was working. Without my money to smooth over the cracks, their dysfunction was leaking out everywhere. But the final twist of the night didn't come from my parents or my brother. It came from the person I expected least. It was 3 in the morning. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a WhatsApp message from an unknown number. I opened it. The profile picture was blank, but the message was clear. "Nia, it is Kaylee. Please don't block me. I am in the bathroom with the water running so they can't hear. I need to talk to you. I didn't know about the forgery, I swear. Marcus showed me a deed with your signature on it. He told me you signed it over as a wedding gift. He lied to me too." I stared at the screen. Kaylee, the influencer who had mocked me hours ago, was now pleading for an audience. She continued typing, the little dots dancing on the screen. "I can't go to jail, Nia. I'm an influencer. My brand is everything. If I get arrested, I lose my sponsorships. I lose my followers. I am willing to help you. I know where he hid the rest of the cash. He didn't spend all 50,000. He has about 10,000 stashed in a hollowed-out book in his old bedroom. And I know about the other accounts, the ones he opened in my name without telling me." She was offering him up. She was trading her husband for her freedom. It was cold, it was calculating, and it was exactly what I needed. Kaylee wasn't a victim. She had enjoyed every second of that vacation. She had eaten the lobster and worn the gold. But unlike Marcus, she was smart enough to know when the ship was going down. She was reaching for a life raft, and she didn't care if she had to kick Marcus in the face to get on it. I typed back slowly. "I am listening." She sent a photo immediately. It was a screenshot of a bank statement I had never seen before. An offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The balance was small, only a few $1,000s, but the transaction history showed transfers from Obsidian Holdings. It was the link Dante needed. It proved Marcus wasn't just a debtor, he was an active participant in the money laundering scheme. He wasn't just paying Volkov, he was moving money for him. "I will testify," Kaylee wrote. "I will tell the police he forced me to sign the papers. I will tell them he threatened me. Just keep my name off the indictment. Please, Nia. We are sisters." Sisters. The word tasted like ash. We weren't sisters. We were enemies who happened to share a last name by marriage. But enemies could be useful. I didn't promise her anything. I didn't offer her immunity. I just sent one word back. "Keep talking." I forwarded the screenshots to Dante. Then I lay back on the lumpy pillows and closed my eyes. The sun was coming up over Chicago. My family was awake, terrified, and tearing each other apart. My sister-in-law was a snitch. My brother was a felon. My mother was a fraud. And my father was a coward who had waited too long to be a man. 72 hours was a long time. We were only 24 hours in and they were already breaking. I wondered what would be left of them by Friday. I wondered if I would even care. The meeting with Mr. Silas, the registered agent for Obsidian Holdings, took place in a windowless conference room in a nondescript office park near O'Hare. It was the kind of place that existed solely on paper, just like the company he represented. Dante sat beside me, looking relaxed, but I knew he was coiled like a spring. I was about to wire $200,000, every cent I had liquidated from my 401k, my investment portfolio, and my emergency fund, to a criminal organization. Silas was a sweaty man, in an ill-fitting suit, who kept checking his watch. He knew the FBI was circling. Dante had made sure of that. We had tipped off a contact at the bureau that Obsidian was a person of interest, just enough to spook them into a fire sale without triggering an immediate asset freeze. Mr. Sterling says you are interested in acquiring the debt portfolio related to the Washington property, Silas said, sliding a thin file across the table. He did not look me in the eye. He just wanted the money and the exit. I am not just interested, I said, my voice steady despite the nausea churning in my stomach. I am the only way you get out of this with any liquidity before the Fed seize your accounts. Silas grunted. 200. Cash wire. Today. I looked at Dante. He gave a barely perceptible nod. I pulled out my laptop. My hands hovered over the keys. This was it. I was crossing the line from victim to player. I was buying my own oppression so I could weaponize it. I authorized the transfer. The screen flashed transaction complete. Silas checked his phone, saw the confirmation, and signed the transfer of ownership documents. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. Pleasure doing business. Don't call me again. He walked out, leaving me with a folder that cost me my life savings. I opened it. There it was. The promissory note Marcus had signed. The deed to my grandmother's house, now technically owned by a holding company that I controlled. I ran my finger over the legal text. I was no longer just the sister who got robbed. I was Obsidian Holdings. I was the entity that Marcus owed $500,000 to. I was the landlord who could evict my mother from her own delusions. Dante smiled, a sharp, terrifying expression. Congratulations, Ms. Washington. You are now the bank, and the bank always collects. The next stop was less corporate and more personal. We drove to the south side to a small, neat bungalow with plastic-covered furniture and pictures of Jesus on every wall. This was the home of Betty Jean Johnson, Auntie Betty, the woman who had stamped my life away. She opened the door wearing a floral housecoat, her eyes widening when she saw me standing there with Dante. "Nia, baby," she stammered, clutching the doorframe. I wasn't expecting company. I walked past her into the living room, the smell of potpourri and betrayal filling my nose. I didn't sit down. I stood in the center of the room where she had hosted prayer circles and book clubs. "I know what you did, Betty," I said softly. "I know you sat in my father's study and notarized a signature you knew was fake. I know my mother paid you. Or maybe she just guilted you. It doesn't matter." Betty's face crumpled. She sank onto the plastic-covered sofa, wringing her hands. "Nia, you have to understand. Your mother, she was in such a state. She said Marcus was in trouble, life or death trouble. She said you wouldn't mind. She said you had plenty of money and you would want to help. She said she had power of attorney." "She lied," I said. "And you didn't check. You took an oath, Betty, and you broke it for a woman who would throw you under the bus the second the police showed up." Betty looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Police? Nia, please. I'm a deaconess. I can't go to jail. It would kill me." Dante stepped forward, placing a digital recorder on the coffee table. "Then you better start talking, Ms. Johnson. Because right now, the district attorney is looking at a conspiracy charge. Unless, of course, you were coerced. Unless you want to go on record right now about exactly what Beatrice Washington said to you, and exactly how she forced you to stamp that deed." Betty looked at the recorder like it was a snake. Then she looked at me. She saw the little girl she had watched grow up, but she also saw the woman who had just bought a criminal enterprise to get justice. She realized that the old rules of the neighborhood, keep your head down, protect the elders, didn't apply anymore. She started talking. It poured out of her like a confession at the altar. She told us everything. How Beatrice had called her crying in the middle of the night. How she had framed it as a spiritual crisis, saying the devil was attacking Marcus, and they needed a financial miracle. How Beatrice had practiced the signature in front of her, laughing nervously, saying it was just a formality because I was too busy to come home. It wasn't just coercion, it was manipulation. Beatrice had weaponized their friendship, their faith, and their history. She had used Betty's trust to commit a felony. "He forced me," Betty sobbed. She said if I didn't do it, Marcus's blood would be on my hands. She said Volkov, she whispered the name like a curse, she said bad men were coming for him. I froze. My mother knew the name. She knew about Volkov. She hadn't just known Marcus was in debt, she knew exactly who he owed. She knew she was dealing with organized crime. I looked at Dante. He nodded. This was the nail in the coffin. My mother wasn't a naive enabler. She was a knowing accomplice to money laundering. We recorded everything, every tearful admission, every detail of the transaction. When Betty finished, she looked small and broken. I left her there weeping into her hands. I felt a twinge of pity, but it was quickly drowned out by the cold reality of what she had cost me. She had chosen her friend over the law, and now she was going to lose both. We sat in the back of Dante's town car as the city lights flickered past. I felt drained, hollowed out. I had spent every dime I had. I had terrorized an old woman. I had entered a world of shadow contracts and shell companies. Dante's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked at me. His face was serious, the professional mask slipping just enough to show the gravity of the situation. That was the PI Reynolds, he said. He just sent over the final report on the bank transfers. Combined with Betty's confession and the documents you just bought from Silas, we have the complete picture. He turned his laptop screen toward me. It was a timeline, a chronological map of the crime. Day 1, Marcus loses big on a soccer match in London. Volkov calls in the debt. Day 2, Marcus calls Beatrice. Beatrice calls the realtor. Day 3, Beatrice calls Betty. The forgery happens. Day 4, the house sells to Obsidian Holdings. Day 5, the money clears. $450,000 goes to Volkov's primary account. $50,000 goes to Marcus's personal account for the trip. Day 6, Beatrice deposits a $5,000 consulting fee into her own account from Marcus. I stared at the last entry. $5,000. My mother had sold me out for a kitchen renovation, and $5,000 in pocket money. That was the price of her loyalty. Dante closed the laptop. We have them, Nia. We have the wire fraud. We have the forgery. We have the money laundering. We have the conspiracy. And now, thanks to your purchase today, we have the leverage of foreclosure. You own the debt Marcus owes. You own the house Beatrice lives in. Wait. No, you own the house you lived in, but you can also put a lien on their primary residence to satisfy the debt Marcus now owes you. He paused, looking me dead in the eye. This is 20 years, Nia. Minimum for Marcus. Probably 10 for your mother if the judge is lenient. Kaylee will get dragged down as an accessory unless she flips all the way. We have enough evidence to bury them so deep they won't see sunlight until they are old and gray. He held up his phone. The district attorney is expecting my call in the morning. I have the complaint drafted. I have the evidence attached. All I have to do is hit send. He waited. The car hummed beneath us. I looked out at the Chicago streets thinking about the brownstone. Thinking about my grandmother Hattie, who had worked her whole life to give me something safe, something real. She would be heartbroken to see this, but she would be furious if I let them get away with it. They had 72 hours. We were at hour 48. They were panicking, turning on each other, lying to save their skins. But they still thought they had a chance. They still thought this was a negotiation. I looked at Dante. "Do not send it yet," I said. Dante raised an eyebrow. "You want to show mercy?" "No," I said, my voice hard as diamond. "I want to look them in the eye when I do it. I want them to know who owns them. Set up a meeting, tomorrow. The 72nd hour. Tell them I am ready to settle. Tell them to bring everything they have. Dante smiled. It was the smile of a man who knew the end of the movie was going to be good. You want to play with your food before you eat it. I leaned back in the leather seat. I paid $200,000 for this meal, Dante. I am going to savor every bite. Here is the script for Part 10. The Trap written in the requested style. The restaurant was one of those places where the lighting was dim and the menus didn't have prices. I chose it deliberately. I wanted them to feel out of place. I wanted them to feel the weight of the bill they couldn't pay. Dante sat next to me, silent as a grave, nursing a scotch. I had a filet mignon in front of me, cooked medium rare. I was cutting into it when they walked in. Beatrice and Marcus looked like ghosts of the people who had flown to the Maldives a week ago. The tan was still there, but it looked jaundiced under the restaurant lights. Marcus was wearing a suit that looked like he had slept in it. Beatrice was wearing her Sunday best, but her hands were shaking so hard she had to clasp them in front of her to hide it. They didn't sit down immediately. They stood by the table waiting for permission. It was a subtle shift, but a seismic one. They knew who held the cards. Sit, I said, not looking up from my steak. They sat. Nia, baby Beatrice, started, her voice trembling with that practiced fragility I knew so well. Thank you for seeing us. We just want to make this right. We are family. We can fix this. I didn't answer. I put a piece of steak in my mouth and chewed slowly. I let the silence stretch until it was thin and brittle. Marcus cleared his throat. He looked at Dante, then quickly looked away, terrified of the man in the suit. Nia, look, I know what it looks like. I know you think I stole the money, but I didn't. I was trying to double it for you, for us. Here it comes. The lie. I invested it, Marcus said, leaning forward, his eyes wide and earnest. I met a guy, a developer. He had a sure thing in crypto real estate. I gave him the money to hold as a buy-in. But he ghosted me. He took off with it. The trip to the Maldives it was a networking event to try and find him. I was trying to get your money back, Nia. I swear, I am a victim here too. I swallowed my food and took a sip of wine. It was a good vintage. I wondered if Volkov drank wine like this while he was threatening to break my brother's legs. So I said, my voice calm. You were scammed. You didn't spend it on luxury hotels and first-class flights. You were just a naive investor trying to help his sister. Exactly, Marcus breathed, thinking he saw a lifeline. I was trying to help. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I didn't unlock it. I just set it on the table between us. That is a fascinating story, Marcus. Truly creative. But it contradicts the version of events I heard from a very reliable source about 3 hours ago. Marcus frowned. Who did you talk to? Your wife, I said. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Kaylee. She called me. I continued, enjoying the way his hands started to twitch. She was very chatty. She wanted to make a deal. She told me about the offshore account in the Caymans. She told me about the hollowed-out book in your old bedroom where you hid $10,000 in cash. And she told me about Volkov. Marcus flinched at the name. He looked like he was about to be sick. She told me you aren't an investor, Marcus. You are a gambler. A bad one. You owe $500,000 to the Russian mob. You sold my house to keep your kneecaps intact. And the best part, she sent me the bank transfer receipts. She sold you out, little brother. She is testifying against you to stay out of prison. Marcus slumped back in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked small. He looked like the little boy who used to break my toys and blame the dog, only now there was no one left to blame. Kaylee wouldn't do that, he whispered. She loves me. She loves not being in a federal penitentiary. Dante interjected, his voice dry. It is a powerful motivator. Beatrice made a noise like a wounded animal. She reached for Marcus's hand, but he pulled away. He was looking at me with pure hatred now. You turned my wife against me. You ruined my marriage. You ruined your marriage when you funded it with felonies, I said. But let's not forget the mastermind. I turned my eyes to my mother. She was weeping softly, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. I didn't know, Nia, she sobbed. I swear on your grandmother's grave. Marcus told me it was an investment. I just signed the papers because I trusted him. I didn't know about any Russians. I didn't know about the gambling. I am an innocent old woman. I cut another piece of steak. It is amazing how much you don't know, Mom. You didn't know about the gambling. You didn't know about the fraud, but you knew exactly how to forge my signature. You practiced it enough times. She froze. The napkin stopped halfway to her face. And you knew exactly who to call to notarize it, I added. Auntie Betty. Beatrice's eyes darted to the door as if she expected the police to burst in. Betty wouldn't. She is my best friend. Was I corrected? She was your best friend. Until Dante and I paid her a visit. We played her the recording of your phone call, Mom. The one where you told her Marcus was in trouble and you needed a favor. The one where you told her I wouldn't mind. She didn't want to go to jail for you, Beatrice. She sang like a bird. She told us everything. How you coerced her. How you used your position in the church to pressure her. She gave a sworn deposition this morning. Beatrice collapsed. It wasn't a physical collapse, but an internal one. Her posture disintegrated, her face sagged. The mask of the pious suffering mother fell away, revealing the terrified, selfish woman underneath. She realized there were no more lies to tell, no more friends to manipulate, no more sons to hide behind. You can't send us to jail, she whispered, her voice trembling. I am your mother. He is your brother. People will talk. The church, the neighbors. It will destroy our reputation. Your reputation. I laughed, a cold, hard sound. You are worried about your reputation. You stole my house. You stole my future. You funded a criminal enterprise. And you are worried about what the choir director will think. We will pay you back, Marcus said, desperation creeping into his voice. I can get a job. We can sell Mom's house. We can set up a payment plan. Just give us time. Please, Naya. 72 hours isn't enough. We need months. Years. I put down my fork and knife. I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin. I looked at them. Really looked at them. They were pathetic. They were weak. And they were mine. I don't want a payment plan, I said softly. And I don't want Mom's house. It is mortgaged to the hilt anyway, isn't it? That is how you paid for the limo. They didn't answer. They didn't have to. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file Silas had given me. I slid it across the table. It landed between the breadbasket and the candle. Open it, I said. Marcus opened the folder. His eyes scanned the document. His breath hitched. This is the note. The debt note. From Obsidian. Yes, I said. I bought it. Yesterday. I bought your debt from Volkov. I own the promissory note. I own the deed to the brownstone. And because Mom co-signed the original fraudulent transfer to facilitate the sale, I own her liability too. The realization washed over them in a wave of horror. They weren't dealing with a sister anymore. They weren't even dealing with the government. They were dealing with a creditor who knew every secret they had. You paid Volkov, Marcus stammered. $200,000 I did, I said. It cost me everything I had. But it was worth it. Because now I don't have to wait for the police. I don't have to wait for a judge. I can foreclose on you right now. I can seize your bank accounts. I can garnish your wages for the rest of your life. I can take everything you have. Everything you ever will have until I am made whole. Beatrice looked at me with horror. You are the devil. No, Mom, I said, leaning forward. I am the daughter you raised. You taught me that money is more important than family. You taught me that power is the only thing that matters. I just learned the lesson better than you did. Dante cleared his throat. He looked at his watch. The 72 hours are up in 10 minutes. We need a decision. Are you going to pay the full amount, $450,000 plus legal fees and interest right now, or do we proceed? Marcus put his head in his hands. We don't have it, Nia. You know we don't have it. It is gone. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I looked down at them shivering in the air-conditioned restaurant. I know you don't have the money, Marcus. I never expected you to pay me back. Then what do you want? Beatrice cried out. What do you want from us? I looked her dead in the eye. I don't want your money, Mom. I want your freedom. I want you to know that every time you take a breath, it is because I allowed it. I want you to know that the roof over your head belongs to me. I want you to wake up every morning wondering if today is the day I decide to collect. I want to own you the way you thought you owned me. I signaled the waiter for the check. You have 24 hours to vacate my house, I said to Marcus. Not the brownstone. Mom's house. Because the lien I am filing tomorrow morning means it isn't hers anymore. It is collateral. And I am calling it in. I dropped a $100 bill on the table for my steak. Enjoy your dinner, I said. It is the last meal you aren't going to have to beg for. I walked out of the restaurant with Dante beside me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. Two broken people who had tried to play a game they didn't understand and who had just found out that the bank always wins. And for the first time in my life, I was the bank. Marcus did not go home to comfort his mother. He did not go to his wife to apologize. He went to the one place he thought was safe, a storage unit off the I-94 service road where he kept his emergency fund. He was running. I knew he would run because cowards always run when the lights get turned on. He was terrified of me, but he was even more terrified of Viktor Volkov. He thought if he could just get to his cash stash, he could disappear before the Russians or the lawyers found him. He did not know that the eyes watching him were not Russian. They were mine. Reynolds was tailing him, broadcasting the feed directly to my tablet. I watched Marcus fumble with the keypad at the storage facility gate, his hands shaking so badly he dropped his keys twice. He drove his leased Range Rover up to Unit 42 and threw open the metal door. He scrambled inside, tearing through boxes of old clothes and forgotten sports equipment until he found a small floor safe. He spun the dial, yanked it open, and froze. It was empty. Of course it was. Kaylee had told me where it was, and Reynolds had secured the contents legally as part of the asset freeze hours ago. Marcus let out a scream that the microphone picked up as a distorted crackle. He slumped against the corrugated metal wall, sliding down until he hit the concrete. He was broken. He had no money, he had no passport, he had no way out. That was when the black SUV pulled up behind his car, blocking him in. Two men in dark suits stepped out. They were not police. They were not lawyers. And they certainly were not the kind of men you invited to Sunday dinner. Marcus scrambled backward, kicking at the dust, his eyes wide with the primal fear of a man who knows his debt has come due. Please, he begged, holding his hands up. I can get the money. I just need more time. Tell Volkov I am good for it. I have a plan. One of the men stepped forward. He was built like a linebacker with a neck thick enough to stop a bullet. Mr. Volkov is no longer your concern, Mr. Washington. The man said, his voice a deep baritone that vibrated with authority. Your debt has been sold. We are here to transport you to the new note holder. Marcus blinked, confusion warring with terror. Sold. Who bought it? Who would buy it? The man did not answer. He simply opened the back door of the SUV. Get in. It was not a request. Marcus looked at the empty safe, then at the two men. He realized he had no choice. He crawled into the back seat looking like a child who had been caught stealing from the collection plate. They drove him downtown, not to a warehouse or a back alley, but to the financial district. The car pulled into the underground garage of a glass skyscraper that pierced the Chicago night. They escorted him up the private elevator to the penthouse floor. This was corporate territory. This was the world of high finance, of mergers and acquisitions, of people who killed you with a pen stroke instead of a pistol. They led him down a long hallway lined with abstract art, and into a corner office with a view that stretched all the way to the lake. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the city lights below and a single desk lamp. A high-backed leather chair was turned away from the door facing the window. Dante stood by the wall, arms crossed, looking satisfied. Marcus stood in the center of the room, shivering in his wrinkled suit. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Who bought the debt?" The chair swiveled slowly. I sat there, my hands folded on the glass desk, looking at the brother I had protected for 30 years. "Hello, Marcus." His knees actually gave out. He grabbed the back of a guest chair to keep from falling. "Nia, you. What are you doing here? Where is the boss?" "I am the boss," I said softly. I stood up and walked around the desk. "I am the note holder. I am the creditor. I am the bank." He shook his head, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "That is impossible. You are a compliance officer. You do not have this kind of money. You do not know people like Volkov." "I know how to spot a distressed asset," I said, leaning against the desk. "And you, Marcus, are the most distressed asset I have ever seen. I bought your debt paper yesterday morning. Volkov was happy to unload it for 20 cents on the dollar because he knew the FBI was closing in. He cut his losses. I picked up his liability. I picked up a file from the desk and threw it at his feet. It landed with a heavy thud. That is your promissory note. $500,000 principal, plus interest, plus late fees, plus the $450,000 you stole from the sale of my house, plus the $50,000 you laundered in the Maldives. Do the math, big brother. You owe me over $1 million. Marcus stared at the file. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw the realization dawn on him. I wasn't his little sister anymore. I wasn't the safety net. I was the spider web. "You cannot do this," he whispered. "We are family. You cannot own your brother." "I can own his debt," I corrected. "And in America that is the same thing. I own you, Marcus. I own the clothes on your back. I own that watch you are wearing. I own the car you drove here in. And because our mother was foolish enough to co-sign the fraudulent transfer documents to facilitate the sale of my home, I own her liability too." I walked closer to him, enjoying the way he shrank back. "I filed a lien on Mom's house this morning. It is already recorded at the county clerk's office. It is collateral now. If you do not pay me back in full immediately, I will foreclose. I will put our mother on the street, and I will sleep like a baby while I do it." Marcus's face twisted. "You are a monster. Mom is old. She has nowhere to go." "She should have thought about that before she became an accomplice to a felony," I said. "She bet the house on you, Marcus." "Literally. She bet her security, her reputation, and her daughter's love on the idea that you were special, that you were a winner. And you lost. You lost it all." He lunged for me then. It was a desperate, flailing movement born of pure panic. But the security guards were faster. They grabbed him by the arms before he got within 3 feet of me and slammed him back into the chair. He sat there panting, defeated. "So what happens now?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. "I don't have $1 million, Nia. You know I don't. Are you going to kill me?" I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Kill you? No. That is too easy. I want you to live, Marcus. I want you to live with the knowledge that you are a failure. I want you to work every day for the rest of your life, knowing that your wages are garnished to pay me back. I want you to look at our mother in her subsidized apartment and know you put her there. I want you to be small." Dante stepped forward, checking his watch. "It is time, Nia." Marcus looked between us. "Time for what?" I walked back to the window and looked down at the street. Flashing blue and red lights were turning the corner, cutting through the darkness. 3 squad cars, unmarked federal vehicles. They were pulling up to the building entrance. I turned back to my brother. "You didn't think I bought the debt just to get my money back, did you?" "I bought it to get the evidence." When I acquired the loan portfolio from Volkov's shell company, I got access to all the transaction records, the wire transfers, the laundering patterns, the emails where you explicitly discussed how to hide the source of the funds using my property sale. Marcus went white. No. Nia, please. I handed that evidence to the FBI 3 hours ago, I said. They were very interested. It seems you are the link they needed to tie Volkov to domestic real estate fraud. You aren't just a debtor anymore, Marcus. You are a co-conspirator in a RICO case. The elevator doors at the end of the hall pinged. Heavy footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Voices shouted clear authoritarian commands. Marcus scrambled out of the chair. He looked for a back exit, a window, anything. But there was nowhere to go. He ran to me, grabbing my hand, his palms sweating. Nia, stop them. Tell them it was a mistake. I will do anything. I will sign anything. Please don't let them take me. I pulled my hand away and wiped it on my jacket. It is out of my hands, I said. You wanted to be a big shot, Marcus. You wanted to play with the big boys. Well, congratulations. You made the big leagues. The office doors burst open. Agents in windbreakers with FBI emblazoned on the back poured into the room, guns drawn but lowered. Federal agents, one of them shouted. Marcus Washington, you are under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. They grabbed him. They spun him around and slammed him against the wall. I watched as they cuffed his hands behind his back. I watched as they read him his rights. He was sobbing now, loud, ugly sounds that echoed in the high-end office. He looked at me one last time as they dragged him out. Nia, he screamed. Help me. I stood still. I didn't look away. I watched until the elevator doors closed, cutting off his screams. The room fell silent again. Dante walked over and poured 2 glasses of scotch from the crystal decanter on the sidebar. He handed one to me. That was cold, he said, clinking his glass against mine. It was necessary, I replied, taking a sip. The liquid burned on the way down a cleansing fire. And your mother? Dante asked. I looked at my phone. I had one more call to make. The lien was active. The eviction notice was drafted. She was next. My mother made her bed, I said, turning away from the window. Now she has to sleep in the street. The fall of Beatrice Washington did not happen in a courtroom. It happened in the front pew of the Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church on a humid Sunday morning. I was not there to see it, but Reynolds had a contact in the choir who streamed the audio to me. I sat in my office sipping tea and listened to my mother's social execution. She had walked in with her head held high, wearing a hat with a brim wide enough to orbit a small planet and a suit that cost more than my first car. She thought she could brazen it out. She thought that because she was a pillar of the community, because she organized the bake sales and led the prayer circle, she was immune to the consequences of her crimes. She thought God would protect her reputation, even if He would not protect her soul. She was wrong. The service had just started when the whispering began. It started in the back rows, a low hum like a hive of angry bees, and moved forward like a wave. Smartphones were being passed around. The news alerts had hit. Local mother and son, indicted in real estate fraud scheme. The headlines were not kind. They detailed the theft, the forgery, the lavish vacation funded by stolen inheritance money. They mentioned the FBI raid. They mentioned Marcus in handcuffs. Beatrice tried to ignore it. She opened her hymnal and sang louder, her voice trembling just slightly on the high notes. But then Reverend Miller stopped the music. He did not look at the congregation. He looked directly at her. Sister Washington, he said, his voice booming through the PA system, heavy with judgment. We have a policy in this house. We do not harbor wolves in sheep's clothing. And we certainly do not honor those who steal from their own children to feed their vanity. The silence that followed was absolute. Beatrice froze. The hymnal slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. The Board of Deacons has met. The Reverend continued. We are revoking your title as Mother of the Year. We are removing you from the Treasury Committee effective immediately, and we are asking that you step down from the choir until you have made right with the law and with your daughter. A gasp went through the room. This was not just a demotion. In our world, this was a death sentence. To be stripped of your titles publicly, to be called out from the pulpit, was a humiliation worse than prison. Beatrice stood up, her knees knocking together. She looked around for support for her friends, for the women she had lunched with for 30 years. Sister Patterson, her best friend, looked away. Deaconess Jones opened a fan and stared at the ceiling. Betty Jean Johnson, who was already facing her own charges, was conspicuously absent. There was no one. My mother was on an island, and the tide was rising. She grabbed her purse and ran out of the sanctuary, the sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, echoing like gunshots. She left her dignity in that pew, and she would never get it back. The legal hammer fell 3 days later. Dante had arranged a plea deal that was less about mercy and more about efficiency. The district attorney did not want to drag an elderly woman through a jury trial if they did not have to. They had Marcus dead to rights on the RICO charges, and he was already singing to cut a deal implicating Volkov's lieutenants. Beatrice was small potatoes to them, but she was the main course to me. She pled guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and aiding and abetting. Because of her age and lack of prior criminal history, the judge agreed to suspend the prison sentence. 5 years probation, electronic monitoring, and absolute total restitution. That was where I came in. The restitution order was for $450,000, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages. Beatrice did not have that kind of money. She had spent her savings on Marcus. She had leveraged her credit to the hilt. She had exactly one asset left: her house. The suburban colonial she had preened in for decades, the house where she had raised her golden boy and ignored her daughter. I owned the lien, I held the debt, and I did not wait. I initiated foreclosure proceedings the minute the gavel came down. The day she moved out was gray and rainy, the kind of weather that seeps into your bones. I parked across the street in my sensible sedan, watching the spectacle. There were no movers. She could not afford them. It was just her and my father carrying boxes out to a rented U-Haul van. My father looked like a broken man. He moved slowly, his back bent, carrying a lamp that I recognized from the living room. He didn't look at the house. He just stared at the ground, putting one foot in front of the other. Beatrice was different. She was fighting every step. She dragged a garment bag full of her Sunday suits down the driveway, her heels sinking into the wet grass. She stopped every few feet to look back at the house, as if she could will it to stay hers. She was losing her kingdom, the garden she had planted, the kitchen she had renovated with my stolen money, the living room where she had hosted her teas. It was all being stripped away. The neighbors were watching. Of course they were. The curtains in the houses on either side were twitching. People were standing on their porches, arms crossed, sipping coffee. These were the people Beatrice had tried to impress for 30 years. These were the people she had lied to about my career, about Marcus's success, about her perfect life. Now they were watching her pack her life into a cardboard box. They weren't coming over to help. They weren't bringing casseroles. They were witnessing her fall. And in the suburbs, that is a spectator sport. She dropped a box of china. I heard the crash from across the street. She didn't bend down to pick it up. She just kicked the shards into the gutter and kept walking. She looked wild. Her hair was unkempt, her makeup non-existent. The mask had fully slipped. She wasn't the queen anymore. She was just a tired, bitter old woman who had bet everything on a lie and lost. I rolled down my window as she walked toward the van. She stopped. She saw me. For a moment I thought she might cry. I thought she might finally break down and apologize. I thought the weight of her actions, the reality of her homelessness, might force a moment of genuine reflection. She walked over to my car. She put her hands on the doorframe, leaning in. Her breath smelled of stale coffee and mints. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hard as flint. "Are you happy, Nia?" she hissed. "Are you satisfied? You took my home. You took my son. You took my name. I took back what was mine," I said calmly. You gave your name away when you signed it to a fraudulent deed. You gave your son away when you let him become a criminal instead of a man. And the house. The house was just collateral damage. I hope you rot. She spat a glob of saliva hitting my cheek. I hope you die alone in that big brownstone with your money and your cold heart. You are not my daughter. You are a curse. I should have left you in the hospital when you were born. I wiped my cheek with a tissue. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel hurt. I felt a strange light sensation in my chest. It was the death of the last lingering hope I had that she might love me. It was gone, and in its place was peace. You are right, Beatrice, I said. I am not your daughter. I am your creditor, and you still owe me $40,000 in legal fees. I will be garnishing your Social Security check starting next month. Have a safe drive. I rolled up the window. She pounded on the glass, screaming soundlessly, her face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. My father came over and pulled her away. He looked at me through the glass, his eyes full of shame, and gave a small, defeated nod. He knew. He knew they deserved this. He dragged her to the van, shoved her into the passenger seat, and drove away. I sat there for a long time watching the rain wash the spit off my car door. I looked at the empty house. It was just a building. Wood and brick and glass. It didn't hold any power over me anymore. I pulled out my phone and called the contractor I had hired to flip it. Change the locks, I said, and paint the front door red. I want it sold by the end of the month. That night back in my grandmother's brownstone, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, probably a payphone or a burner. I answered it, putting it on speaker while I poured a glass of wine. Nia. It was her voice. Raspy. Broken, but still venomous. Hello, Mother. I just wanted to tell you one thing, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You think you won. You think because you have the house and the money you won, but you lost. You have no family. You have no one. You are going to freeze in that house. Marcus will be out in 10 years. And when he gets out, he will come for you. You hear me? He will come for you. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like oak and victory. Let him come, I said. I have a security system now. And a very good lawyer. And mother. What? The next time you call me, make sure it is to ask where to send the check. Otherwise, you are violating the harassment order Dante filed this morning. Do not make me call your probation officer. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence where I could hear her breathing, hear the rage choking her. Then she let out a scream of frustration and slammed the phone down. I looked at the receiver. I smiled. Then I blocked the number. I walked over to the fireplace where my grandmother's picture sat on the mantel. She looked stern in the photo, but her eyes were kind. She knew. She had always known. That was why she gave me the house, not just for shelter, but for armor. I toasted her picture. We did it, Grandma, I whispered. The wolves are gone. I sat down in her favorite armchair and looked around the room. It was quiet. It was safe. And it was mine. Every brick, every floorboard, every shadow. I wasn't lonely. I was free. And freedom, I realized, was expensive, but it was worth every penny. Here is the script for Part 13, Justice, written in the requested style. The day of the sentencing was gray and rainy in Chicago, the kind of weather that makes the city feel like it is weeping. I walked into the federal courthouse with Dante beside me, his steps echoing the rhythm of my own heart. This was it, the final act of a tragedy that had started 30 years ago when my parents decided one child was a gift and the other was a utility. The courtroom was packed. The media was there, drawn by the salacious details of the influencer fraud ring, as they were calling it. My mother Beatrice sat in the back row wearing a black dress, as if she were attending a funeral, which in a way she was. She looked small and withered, stripped of her titles, and her home, living in a subsidized apartment that smelled of boiled cabbage and regret. She did not look at me. Marcus was led in by the marshals. The orange jumpsuit hung off his frame. He had lost 20 pounds in county lockup. The swagger was gone. The tan from the Maldives had faded, leaving his skin sallow and gray. He looked at the gallery, searching for a friendly face, but found only the cold lenses of press cameras and the stony expressions of the people he had scammed. He looked at Kaylee sitting 3 rows behind the prosecution table, but she was studying her manicure, refusing to acknowledge his existence. The judge was a woman with eyes like flint and a reputation for handing out sentences that ended lives. She called the court to order and looked directly at me. Ms. Washington, the court understands you have prepared a victim impact statement. You may approach the podium. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my spine was steel. I walked to the wooden stand, adjusting the microphone. I looked at Marcus. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the sister he had discarded. Your Honor. I began, my voice steady in the silent room. When I was 10 years old, my brother broke my grandmother's vase playing ball in the house. My mother blamed me for not watching him. When I was 18, my college fund was drained to pay for his first DUI lawyer. My father told me family helps family. When I was 32, they sold my home to pay for his vacation. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. This crime was not an event. It was a culmination. It was the final chapter in a book titled The Golden Child. My mother and father created a monster by feeding him my future. They taught him that his desires were emergencies, and my needs were negotiable. They taught him that I existed to be harvested. When he forged my signature, he did not think he was committing a crime. He thought he was making a withdrawal from an account he was entitled to. He thought I was property. Marcus flinched. A single tear rolled down his cheek, but I felt no pity. Pity was the currency they had used to bankrupt me. This court case is about fraud, I continued. It is about wire transfers and forged deeds and money laundering. But for me, it is about the theft of personhood. They tried to erase me. They tried to take the one thing my grandmother left me, the one thing that was solely mine, and turn it into party favors for a man who has never worked a hard day in his life. I am asking the court not for vengeance but for correction. I am asking you to tell Marcus Washington and everyone who enabled him that I am not a resource. I am not a safety net. I am a person, and I am done paying for his mistakes. I stepped back. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the reporters had stopped typing. The judge nodded slowly, her face grim. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Washington, you have pleaded guilty to wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. You have admitted to working with organized crime figures to hide assets stolen from your own sister. The court finds your actions not only criminal, but morally repugnant. You preyed on the trust of your family and the vulnerability of your community. Marcus stood up, his chains rattling. Your Honor, please, he choked out. I'm sorry. I just got in over my head. I never meant to hurt anyone. The judge cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand. You meant to take a vacation while your sister was homeless. You meant to pay off a gambling debt with her inheritance. Intent is not your problem, Mr. Washington. Entitlement is. She looked down at her papers, taking into consideration the severity of the crimes, the amount of money involved, and your cooperation in the RICO case against Viktor Volkov. This court sentences you to 96 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to the victim. 96 months. 8 years. Marcus buckled as if he had been shot. He grabbed the table to hold himself up. 8 years of his life gone. He would be 43 when he got out. His youth, his potential, his golden years all wasted in a concrete box. Beatrice let out a low wail from the back of the room, a sound of pure despair, but no one moved to comfort her. She had built this cage for him, bar by bar. The marshals moved to take him away, but before they could, Kaylee stood up. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and cold. May I approach the defendant? The judge looked surprised, but nodded briefly. Make it quick. Kaylee walked to the railing. She looked impeccable in a white suit, the picture of innocent beauty. She looked at Marcus, who was looking at her with desperate hope. "Kay," he whispered. "Baby, wait for me." Kaylee reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. She did not hand it to him gently. She tossed it onto the defense table. It slid across the wood and stopped in front of his handcuffed hands. "These are divorce papers, Marcus," she said loud enough for the press to hear. "My lawyer filed them this morning. I am not going to be a prison wife. And I am certainly not going to be married to a man who lied about his net worth." Marcus stared at the envelope. "Kay, please," he begged. "We can work this out." "There is nothing to work out," she said, smoothing her hair. "You are broke. You are a felon. And honestly, you were never that good in bed anyway. Goodbye, Marcus." She turned and walked out of the courtroom, her heels clicking on the floor like a metronome counting down the seconds of his destruction. It was brutal. It was heartless. And it was exactly what he deserved. He had married a trophy and was surprised when she didn't want to be mounted on a prison wall. The judge turned her attention back to the bench. Regarding the property at 425 King Drive, she ruled. The court finds the deed transfer was fraudulent and void ab initio. The title is hereby restored to Nia Washington, free and clear of all liens and encumbrances. The mortgage taken out by the shell company is nullified. The house is yours, Ms. Washington. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The house. My grandmother's house. It was legally mine again. No more shell companies. No more Volkov. No more fear. Marcus was dragged out the side door sobbing. He looked back at me one last time, his eyes pleading for a rescue that wasn't coming. I just watched him go. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just witnessed it. The golden boy was finally tarnished beyond repair. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, washed new. Beatrice was standing on the steps, looking lost. She saw me and took a step forward, her hand reaching out. "Nia," she said, her voice trembling. "He is gone. My boy is gone. What am I going to do?" I stopped. I looked at the woman who had practiced my signature until she got it right. I looked at the woman who had sold my sanctuary for a kitchen renovation. "You are going to survive, Mother," I said, "just like you taught me to. You are going to go back to your apartment, and you are going to live within your means for the first time in your life." "But I am all alone," she whispered. "Family sticks together." I put my sunglasses on. "Family does not steal from family," I said. "You made your choice when you signed that deed. You chose him. Now you can serve his time with him in spirit. Do not call me. Do not come to the brownstone. If you do, I will have you arrested for trespassing." I walked down the steps, leaving her standing there, a small figure against the massive stone pillars of justice. Dante was waiting by the car, holding the door open. "It is done," he said. "It is done," I agreed. We got in the car. "Drive," I told the driver. "Take me home, to my house." As the city blurred past the window, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was heavier than that. It was peace. The kind of peace that comes after a war, when the guns finally go silent, and you realize you are the only one left standing. I had lost my brother. I had lost my mother. But I had found myself. And I had my keys back. That was enough. That had to be enough. It has been exactly 365 days since the gavel fell. 1 year since I walked out of that courthouse and breathed air that didn't taste like betrayal. The seasons have turned in Chicago. The gray slush of winter has given way to the humidity of summer, then the crisp gold of autumn, and now the first snow is dusting the limestone steps of my grandmother's brownstone. But inside it is warm, it is vibrant, and most importantly, it is mine. I stood in the center of the living room, holding a crystal flute of champagne. The space was unrecognizable from the dusty museum of memories my mother had looted. I had gutted it. I had to. I needed to exorcise the ghosts. The beige carpets were gone, replaced by rich dark hardwood that gleamed under the recessed lighting. The kitchen, the one Beatrice had sold my soul to renovate, was now a chef's dream of marble and matte black fixtures, a kitchen she would never set foot in. I had filled the walls with art, from local black artists, vibrant canvases that spoke of resilience and joy. The furniture was modern, sculptural, and unapologetically expensive. It was no longer Hattie's house. It was Nia's house. The room was full of laughter. Not the polite, judged laughter of the church ladies, but the raucous, belly-deep laughter of people who are truly free. This was my housewarming party. It was a year late, but I had been busy. I looked around at the faces of my chosen family. There was Reynolds, the private investigator, looking uncomfortable but pleased in a blazer holding a beer. There were my colleagues from the firm who had covered my workload when I was fighting the legal battle of the century. And there, leaning against the mantel of the fireplace, was Dante. He raised his glass to me. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was in a cashmere sweater that softened his shark-like edges, but his eyes were still sharp. He had been my sword and my shield. We weren't just attorney and client anymore. We were survivors of the same war. I walked over to him, the sound of jazz playing softly in the background. "You did good, Nia," he said, looking around the room. Hattie would have loved this. She would have, I agreed. She would have loved that I didn't just keep the house. I upgraded it. I made it a fortress. "How are they?" Dante asked quietly. He didn't need to specify who. The specters of my past still lingered in the periphery, even if they couldn't touch me. I took a sip of champagne. They are exactly where they belong. I didn't need Reynolds' reports anymore to know the state of the Washington family, but I read them anyway. It kept me grounded. It reminded me why I locked the doors at night. Beatrice was living in a subsidized one-bedroom apartment in a complex on the far edge of the city. It was a place where the elevators smelled like urine, and the heat rattled in the pipes. She had lost the colonial house in the suburbs. She had lost her car. She had lost her standing. The church had formally asked her not to return after the scandal broke. The women she had preened in front of for decades now crossed the street to avoid her. She was alone, truly deeply alone. She spent her days watching daytime television and telling anyone who would listen that she was the victim of a vindictive daughter and a corrupt legal system. No one believed her, and Marcus, my golden brother, he was currently housed in a low-security federal correctional institution 3 states away. But low security didn't mean easy. He wasn't running the yard. He wasn't the big man on campus. He was a small fish in a tank full of piranhas. Without his designer clothes, without his mother to smooth his path, he had crumbled. The report said he had lost 30 pounds. He kept to himself. He worked in the laundry detail for 12 cents an hour. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was finally doing an honest day's work washing other people's dirty linens, just like he had tried to wash his dirty money through my inheritance. Kaylee had divorced him before the ink was dry on his sentencing papers. She had rebranded herself on social media as a survivor of financial abuse. She was selling a course on how to spot red flags in relationships. It was nauseating, but it was harmless. She was a grifter just like him, but she was a grifter who knew when to cut bait. She never tried to contact me. She knew better. I walked over to the hallway away from the party for a moment. There was a small alcove there lit by a gallery light. On the wall, framed in black wood behind museum-quality glass, was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a degree. It wasn't an award. It was a letter. It had arrived 3 days ago. The handwriting was shaky, the ink cheap. It was from Beatrice. "Nia," it read. "I am sick. The apartment is cold. I need money for heating oil. I know you are angry, but God tells us to honor our parents. I am your mother. Please, just a few $100s. Marcus needs money for the commissary too. He is hungry. Don't be cruel. Love, Mom." I stared at it. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, after everything, she still tried to use God as a crowbar to pry open my wallet. She still prioritized Marcus's hunger over my trauma. She still thought she could command me. I didn't frame it because I missed her. I framed it because it was my diploma. It was proof that I had graduated from their school of manipulation. Every time I looked at it, I didn't feel guilt. I felt victory. I felt the immense crushing weight of obligation lift off my shoulders. I wasn't cruel, I was just closed for business. Dante came up behind me. He looked at the letter, then at me. You kept it. I did, I said. It reminds me. Reminds you of what? That I am not the bank I said, and I am not the doormat. I am the woman who burned the bridge so I could see the light. Dante smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He handed it to me. I didn't get you a housewarming gift, he said. Until now. I opened it. Inside was a keychain. It wasn't gold. It wasn't diamond encrusted. It was a simple, heavy brass key. It is a master key, he said. For the new security gate I had installed out front this morning. You didn't notice it when you came in because the installers were just finishing up. It is biometric. Fingerprint access only. No more keys to steal. No more locks to pick. Only you get in Naya. Only you. I closed my hand around the cold metal. It felt like an anchor. It felt like a promise. Thank you, I whispered. Come back to the party, he said, touching my arm. Your family is waiting. I looked back at the living room. My friends were laughing. Someone was pouring wine. The house was alive with warmth and safety. He was right. My family was waiting. My real family. The people who showed up. The people who didn't steal. The people who loved me without conditions. I took the framed letter off the wall. I walked to the kitchen where the trash compactor was built into the marble island. I smashed the glass against the edge of the counter. The chatter in the living room stopped. Everyone looked at me. I pulled the crumpled letter out of the broken frame. I tossed it into the trash. I didn't need it on my wall anymore. I didn't need the reminder. I knew who I was. I turned to the room, raising my glass. To vacations, I said, my voice ringing clear and strong. The room went silent, confused. My mother sold this house because she said my brother needed a vacation. I continued looking at Dante, who was grinning. She said I didn't need the house. She said I was selfish. Well, she was right about one thing. Everyone deserves a break. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of sage and freedom. They wanted a trip to the Maldives. They wanted luxury. They wanted to escape reality. So I gave them a vacation. I gave them a permanent vacation from my life. I gave Marcus a vacation in a federal cell where he doesn't have to worry about paying bills for 8 years. And I gave Beatrice a vacation from the burden of being a mother since she was so bad at it. I smiled, and it was the sharp, dangerous smile of a woman who had walked through fire and come out holding a flamethrower. And me, I am taking a vacation from toxicity. I am taking a permanent holiday from guilt. This house isn't just a building, it is my resort. And the occupancy is full. Cheers, Dante said, raising his glass. Cheers, the room echoed. I drank the champagne. It tasted like justice. Cold, sweet, and expensive. I was Nia Washington. I was the owner of 425 King Drive. And I was finally completely home. This story teaches us a powerful lesson. Family is defined by actions, not DNA. When the people who should protect you become your predators, you have every right to protect yourself. Nia's journey proves that setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty, it is an act of survival. We learned that financial independence is the ultimate shield against manipulation, and that true peace comes not from seeking validation from those committed to misunderstanding you, but from building a life that honors your own worth. Sometimes you have to let go of the family you were born into to find the peace you deserve. If Nia's victory gave you the satisfaction you needed today, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories, where justice is always served cold.